There's a Latino tradition on New Year's Eve of throwing out a bucket of water to signify tossing out the old and looking forward to the new. And that's what we'll be doing when we leave behind some of the worst things that Heat fans have to deal with: media disrespect, lack of award consideration, and the constant trade rumors. That all stays behind in 23. Buckle up and listen to the best episode of the new year on Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. I'm Wes Goldberg, NBA media member and editor at allyoucanheat.com. Joining me as always, it's longtime NBA reporter David Ramil. However you're tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day, and maybe even your first listen of the new year. So happy New Year to everybody. To celebrate, we're just going to talk about the 2023 leave behinds. These are things that we want to leave behind in 2023 and not bring with us in 2024, David. So let's just jump right into this thing. And I want to start with trade rumors. I want to start with trade rumors because of two reasons. The first reason is the conversation around the trade rumors was so toxic when it was happening. The Damian Lillard stuff, all those things. And it got a lot less fun. And I like trade rumors. I like doing the fake trades. I like speculating about all this stuff. And I think that's just part of sports. And I think it's part of being in sports media. It's part of the fun thing in the conversation. How would this player fit in that team? If this team could swap this player out and make this upgrade, how far can they go? Like, that's just sports. That's talking sports. What we got this in 2023 was very far from sports. And it just felt like it was toxic, and it was two fan bases going after each other. And it was just quite frankly annoying. And it kind of took me off Twitter, and I didn't enjoy it. And that's what we're supposed to be doing here, is enjoying this stuff. So that's the number one reason. The number two reason, and probably the more important reason, David, and I think you agree with me on this, maybe the Heat don't even need to make a trade. And so there's a lot of it's for those two reasons that I think we are prepared now to maybe leave the trade rumors in 2023. Although, David, I think you and I know maybe some of your best New Year's resolutions, they don't last very long until you end up back on the wagon there. And we're probably going to end up talking about some trade speculation as early as February. But I don't know. Can we get through a month? I don't know.
The gyms in January are always packed, and then by April, they start thinning out a little bit. So I think that, in this case, it might be by mid-February when we might not be able to live up to that resolution or that leave behind. And I know a lot of our listeners and viewers are probably saying, well, that's kind of hypocritical and rolling their eyes as we say this. That's part of covering the team. As you said, this is Heat media. We have to dive into these rumors. It's not like we're personally attached to any player and saying we have to trade for this player or anything like that. But it is an unfortunate byproduct that does wind up becoming, as you said, very, very toxic, because Miami should be able to have an interest in Damian Lillard without, Blazer fan 98 jumping on and saying Tyler Hero stinks, nobody wants him, Damian Lillard is trash, etc. Why would you make that trade for him? Who wants your garbage package of this, that, and third? It absolutely becomes
or attacking fans, like the fans attacking each other. Like it's I understand that's the internet and all that stuff, but let's leave that part behind, because the other part about what you were just saying too is if there's news, we have to talk about it, right? Like, we're not making up trade rumors. Some people are. Some people like to make up trade rumors. You and I don't do that here. We're not interested in doing that. But if there's something credible that's out there, such as Damian Lillard publicly demanding a trade to Miami, we're going to talk about that. Yeah. And so, and we're also going to do our fair bit of trade speculation. But you'll notice that I did not say keep trade speculation in 2023. Trade speculation very much still on tap here in 2024. Let's just try to be better when it does come to the trade rumors. But let's get to the next thing. Something I want to leave behind in 2023 is Duncan Robinson being quote unquote overpaid. And I think we're all in agreement here. And I don't even need to rehash the fact that he did underperform with the contract that he had signed. And this is the first year that he's played well and lived up to the contract that he signed. It's the first year since he's signed the contract. Credit to him. We don't get to talk about him being overpaid anymore. David, may I go so as far as to say he might be underpaid at making $18 million a year? You look across the league, and there are some players making $20+ million a year. What Duncan Robinson is doing, the best volume three-point shooter in the league this season, shooting almost 45% on threes. David, he's making almost 50% of his shots overall from the field. The passing that we've already talked about, we've covered a lot about Duncan Robinson. We've talked with Duncan Robinson. So I think we're over it. I think the idea of Duncan Robinson being overpaid, that is so 2023. Welcome to 2024.
I was over it from the minute that extension or a contract was signed, to be honest with you. I never really have wanted to measure a player's value by the contract they sign. And I understand the idea of paying somebody for a requisite amount of work, but there's also something that you and I have talked about, the denying of the human factor and the reality that he was struggling with the idea of having to live up to that contract, even as defenses were actually keying in on trying to take away the best aspect of what he does. And so it has taken some time for him in order to progress and develop and reach this level where he's at right now. But I am 100% in agreement. I never want to say another thing about a player being overpaid, and certainly not when it comes to Duncan Robinson. He's living up to his deal. One of the best shooters in the NBA, one of the best shooters in NBA history, a great scorer in the fourth quarter. And I think that really counts for Miami, as they have, and they will continue to have a number of these clutch games. You're going to need Duncan Robinson to play at his very best in order for Miami to make another deep postseason run.
And it kind of relates to the trade rumors thing, doesn't it? Because Duncan Robinson was getting thrown into every trade that you could think of, every fake trade idea, and for this, that, or the other. And I don't know that the Heat can afford to throw him into any of those trade rumors anymore. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying that he's untouchable. Yeah. I mean, look, if Nikola Jokic decided that he wanted to play for the Miami Heat, they'd throw Duncan Robinson into the deal. But that being the point is he's not this player that the Heat are going to be actively shopping, or maybe that fans think that they should be actively shopping anymore, because he's become a real asset instead of a guy who might be a burden on their cap sheet. And that is a huge change, isn't it? And so they do have that. All right, one more leave behind here that I want to get to. And I originally had this written down as Bam Adebayo not getting enough credit. But what they teach you in goal setting is make it specific and attainable. And not getting enough credit, I don't know that was specific enough, nor I don't think is it attainable, because it's not up to me whether or not Bam gets enough credit. And really none of this stuff is really up to me anyway. But that said, Bam Adebayo not having a Defensive Player of the Year award on his resume, that's specific. And that's something that I want to leave behind in 2023. And David, I do think it's attainable. He's already, despite having missed a few games, one of FanDuel's favorites for Defensive Player of the Year. I think he's only going to continue to build that case as the year goes on. I don't know that I would bet on him right now to win the award. Rudy Gobert is the favorite, and it makes sense. But I do think it's an attainable goal. I don't think it's completely outlandish that Bam Adebayo could win Defensive Player of the Year. After all, he's been a finalist in each of the last 5 seasons for this, or 4 seasons for this award, or at least been top 5 in voting. So Bam Adebayo not having a Defensive Player of the Year award, that's something that I would like to leave behind in 2023.
100%. Look, I mean, you don't have to knock Gobert. I like Rudy's defense. And I mean, I think he's a very good player. And even though he struggled last year with the Timberwolves, I think he's bounced back in remarkable fashion. But you can't look at what everybody else in that team does, whether it's Anthony Edwards or Mike Conley or Jared. I mean, there's McDaniels. Like, they've got so many different players there that they can count on defensively. And when you look at what Bam does, he is such a very good individual player. And he is so responsible for what Miami's defense looks like and why they can wind up locking down teams. And look, I think it's amazing to hear his peers say it. And I know Udonis Haslem was a former teammate for a long time, et cetera. But for him to say, I've never seen anybody lock up players 1 through 5 the way this man does in reference to Bam Adebayo, that should speak volumes to everybody. Like, that is and has been the only thing that I consider when you look at what Bam's credentials are, is that he could shut down Steph Curry and, Wembanyama in the same possession. He can do it all. And that just is an incredible feat for him. So I'd love to leave that behind. I don't think it's going to make much of a difference. As you said, we can't control the future. But yes, I would love to leave not getting a Defensive Player of the Year award behind, and hopefully he can win one this season.
My argument with this is if you were going to do a draft of the NBA players and have to build a defense around that player, which player are you picking? And I think Rudy Gobert might be the number one pick for a lot of people and organizations, and I won't argue with that. Rudy Gobert is amazing. He's one of the greatest defenders and rim protectors that we've ever seen in this league. He's won Defensive Player of the Year several times already. But if he's not number one, then number two would be Bam Adebayo, and I don't know that that's even that debatable of a statement or even controversial of a statement. And so with that, we'll move on to somebody who is a little bit more in control of the Bam Adebayo narrative and whether or not he wins the Defensive Player of the Year award. And that's the national media. And do they need their own goals for 2024? What can they leave behind in 2023? We're going to talk about that next year on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The weather's getting colder, and the NFL offers, though, stay hot over at FanDuel, because right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets if you're winning any $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use, and there's a wide range of betting options from spreads to player props, over-unders, and so much more. Go visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and kick off the NFL and NBA season. FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. If you're not subscribed, please do subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast app. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to hit that like button. Let's move on to our next 2023 leave behinds, the things that we don't want to carry with us into the new year. And one thing is the national media underestimating the Miami Heat. And I'm really not this guy on the show, David. I don't point the fingers at the national media so much as I think a lot of Heat fans do, just because I don't really expect what do you expect? I don't expect much from a media entity whose job it is not to just cover the Miami Heat. Their job is to cover all the teams and sometimes all the sports, depending on what we're talking about here. I do think that the Heat have been a little bit overlooked, but again, like last year, they were the 8th seed in the playoffs. They barely made it into the playoffs because they had to go through the play-in tournament. To act like the Milwaukee Bucks were the overwhelming favorite isn't some act of defiance or something, against the Miami Heat. It's just the facts. Like the Heat were an underwhelming favorite or an overwhelming underdog in that series, which only makes what they did that much more surprising and that much more special, right? And so I don't know that I'm at the point of, wow, the national media just hates us and they got it out for the Miami Heat. But I do think there is something to be said about what the Heat did in 2023 is specific to them. And I don't know that we're at the point where the regular season doesn't matter, because I do think the regular season matters a lot for some teams. I don't know that it matters as much for the Heat as it does for other teams, although it obviously still matters. And by the way, the Heat would be the first team to tell you, hey, the regular season matters. So in that sense, I think maybe even underestimating isn't fair, but maybe they have just a better gauge of what it is that the Miami Heat are doing and how it is that they approach these things and what it is that they are capable of, even if they're not doing it the same way that other teams are doing it.
I can't explain it when I listen to that every year, because one of the things that I think a lot of people fall in love with sports for is that rooting for the underdog and wanting to see the little guy, find a way to triumph, to overcome odds. It's why sports movies get made, when they talk about these stories about, people overcoming adversity and coming together and finding a way to triumph. And yet the Heat have done that so frequently. They've been such a successful franchise. And yet, despite all that, everybody wants to act as if the Heat are these Johnny-come-latelys who have never done this before. And it's always a fluke. It's always a mistake. It's always South Beach sunlight and no taxes. Like that's the reason why. It's not late afternoon practices, for the third day in a row. It's not those vicious two-a-days in training camp. It's not continuing to find ways to develop guys that are undrafted and finding a way to make a name for themselves in the NBA, which is such a difficult challenge to do. And yet the Heat keep finding guys that have no business being in the league and turn them into good NBA players and get them paid. And yet everybody's kind of saying, nope, the Heat suck. So I have no idea why at some point we just stop rooting for the underdog, especially if that underdog wears a Heat jersey. And so I am very much 100% in support of what you're saying. I am tired of the Heat disrespect. I am so sick of it. It's just gone on too much. I will add something to that, specifically to the Heat, and then another thing that's kind of more general in terms of media coverage. I am sick of people dissing Heat culture, again, for the same reasons I just laid out. Heat culture is real. Heat culture works. It's about accountability. It's about making the most of what you can do on the floor and doing the best that you can to support your teammates, to find your role and excel in it. Heat culture has been a proven thing since Pat Riley joined the team in 1995, and everybody around the league should be covering it and talking about it and glorifying it in a way. Maybe, I know it's become kind of hackneyed as an ad campaign or a slogan and things of that sort.
Yeah.
But it works. It's real. Yeah. And there's something tangible to it. And then players come through, even if they've been here for a year, they'll say, you know what? Heat culture is real. Think about Andre Iguodala, who spent years on a number of teams, years winning championships at Golden State. And whenever he gets the opportunity to talk about the Heat, he is so prolific in his praise of this organization, and I think that speaks volumes that
the
people should be understanding.
They should. And look, it's not a magic thing. It's not this one-off thing. Heat culture is just like, it's not something that they made up. Now, because they have used it as a hashtag so blatantly for a few years now, I understand why some people would be annoyed by that. I get it. I'm a little annoyed by it. I'm kind of just like, all right, enough. Like, I get it. You know, it's a great hashtag. Cool. It's on the jersey. Like, whatever. I think the jerseys this year look cool, but you know, sometimes it is a little bit overplayed. That said, the idea of Heat culture isn't new to the Miami Heat. It's just workplace culture. It's a workplace environment. I used to intern at the Orlando Business Journal, and we did a top 100 ranking of the top businesses in Orlando, Florida every single year based on workplace culture and hiring practices and just things that you do at a normal, well-run company or organization. That's not unique to the NBA or to the Miami Heat. It's not. It's just how you run a good organization. Some teams are really bad at running their organizations. Some teams are really good at running their organizations. The Miami Heat might be the best at running their specific organization. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have to win championships every year, but the consistency, the way that people, like you said, David, talk about the organization when they leave. I'll put it even more simply. To anybody who doubts Heat culture, have you ever had a bad job and have you ever had a good job? What was the difference other than maybe pay? It was the workplace environment, your bosses, all those things, how supported you felt and all those things. That's really just all Heat culture is. Just drop the hashtag, put a lowercase c instead of the capital C, and you just have workplace environment, and that's all we're talking about. And the Heat have built a great one over the years. That said, anything else 2023 leave behind related to sort of national media? Because you hinted at something before.
I do want to leave behind negative coverage of the league, because I think it's just become way too rampant. I am so sick of people dissing the game, the players, finding a way, whether it's these old heads. And I know that the TNT crew is just basically entertainment, and everybody kind of just says, oh, that's just Charles being Charles, and Kenny and Shaq mumbling their way through things. But I just find it to be like, everybody wants to compare the NFL and NFL coverage to the NBA and how much more positive it is and how they break things down. And yet, you know, you and I do, I think, a great job of covering the daily events around this team. And we never try to be negative. But national media, and by and large, does tend to be very negative, whether it's First Take and the ESPN garbage that gets spewed on there, whether you're dissing, you know, either players or teams or coworkers or coaches. Let's leave that behind. This is a great game that we're listening. If you're listening to this podcast, it's because you love this game, and you don't love it because you love hating these players or love hating these teams. It's about loving the players that you love and of the team that you love that has inspired you to. Yeah, the game itself. I mean, that's to me something I really want to leave behind, that negativity.
I love it. And just personally speaking, if we're going to have a real conversation here, one of the things that I was thinking about every year going into the season, I'm like, okay, how do I want to approach the game? How do I want to change my coverage? How do I want to do my job this year? And one of the things I wanted to focus on was I want to just do the things that bring me joy, the things that I have fun talking about, the articles that I have fun writing. Like if I'm not having fun doing it, then why am I doing it? Right. And so that's the whole point of all this whole thing that we're doing here. And we started this podcast because we just loved basketball and talking about the Miami Heat. That's why this podcast exists. Yeah. And nobody was paying us. It was for the love of the game, man. Like we did it. We were, So look, it's a great message, and just remember that it's not necessarily a job, even though it is a job, but to just sit down, watch the basketball games, and enjoy it for what it is, and that's really it. All right. It's also what I want to do with this podcast is make the Heat more fun to watch because you're listening and watching this show. And that's our goal here, is to just make it more fun for you. And that's all we're trying to do here. That said, a lot of fun things happening with the Miami Heat right now, but some things that we still do want to leave behind in 2023, including some frustrations over a certain Miami Heat star player. We're going to get to that next here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. You shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event. Gametime is the fast and easiest way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy shows, theater events near you. They've got great last-minute deals, all in prices. The views from your seat feature and their best price guaranteed. Gametime takes all the guesswork out of buying tickets. Look, you could sometimes buy tickets for an event. Maybe it was a last-minute thing that you came up with, or you happen to be in town. Let's say you got out of a meeting early and you say, you know what, I want to go catch this game, or I want to go catch a comedy show nearby. You look up Gametime on your app and you go, you know what, I could get tickets for something much cheaper than you would have thought, even if you had bottom hours or days earlier. That's how good Gametime is. You can get those last-minute ticket deals, and you can wind up saving a ton of money, and especially if you wind up downloading Gametime right now. Download the Gametime app, you create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA, and you get $20 off your first purchase. Gametime's got the deals on tickets right up to the start of the event, so make sure you download the Gametime app. Locked On NBA, that's the code you use, LOCKEDONBA, and you get $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube and on your favorite podcast app. Our 2023 leave behinds, moving on to Jaime Jaquez Jr. skepticism. And I don't know that skepticism is even the right word here, David, because I don't know that people were just skeptical of this guy. He was the 18th pick in the draft, and understandably, like, I don't really know what to expect from this guy. A middle first-round pick. We'll see. 22 years old, came out of UCLA, impressive run there, but I have no idea. Nobody does. And then he just comes out, and he's probably the third best rookie in the NBA this year. I would have him third. Some people might have Brandon Miller third. I would argue Jaime. If you've got Brandon Miller up there, I'm not really going to fight with you over that. But to me, it's Jaime. And I pulled this up earlier today, David. Not just what he's doing as a rookie, but what he's doing as a 22-year-old. Because we talk a lot about how Jaime being a 22-year-old is really important. And why maybe he's a little bit more advanced than some other rookies. And I think there's something to that. I also think it might be unfair to compare Jaime to other rookies a little bit because he's 22 and a lot of these guys are 19. You know what I mean? And so when you look at Jaime as compared him to other 22-year-olds in the league, those are guys like Anthony Edwards, LaMelo Ball, Scotty Barnes, Cade Cunningham, Franz Wagner. Like, these are really good players making all NBA cases. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you Jaime Jaquez Jr. is as good as Anthony Edwards right now. I don't think that he needs to ever be as good as Anthony Edwards. That's not really his role on this team. And he obviously wasn't picked number one overall the way that Anthony Edwards was. But he is up there in all of the stats. He's 10th in points per game. He's 7th in true shooting percent among all 22-year-olds in the NBA. 7th in true shooting percentage, 9th in assists, 9th in steals, and 11th in minutes played. This guy consistently ranks among the top players in all of those categories. And so not only is Jaime Jaquez Jr. the third best rookie in the NBA, he is just flatly one of the best 22-year-olds in the NBA. And I think that's a worthwhile conversation to have. We recently made his case for Sixth Man of the Year, and I think he has the legitimate case at that. And so, yeah, I think, again, skepticism wasn't the right word, but let's just accept that Jaime Jaquez Jr., very good basketball player. Not that we weren't already doing that, but anything you had in terms of skepticism, that stays behind in 2023.
I know it's become kind of a running bit for us and for me in particular to say that the draft is such a not necessarily a waste of time because you have to be picked into this league somehow, unless you're an undrafted player and you want to being selected by the Miami Heat and added to their roster. For the most part, the draft is what builds these rosters up around the league, and I totally get that. But it is so impossible to prognosticate what these futures will look like, and so
Sure.
when it comes to Jaime and his overall impact, I just read something about this today from a friend of the show, Mark Schindler. He was talking about his own an inability to evaluate what it was that Hawkins did well because UCLA wasn't able to maximize those post ups that have now become such a steady diet for him in a Heat uniform. But on top of that, it doesn't take into consideration the intangibles, the ability to maximize weaknesses in your and to continue to develop strengths. And I think that's something that this Heat organization does so well. So I'm glad to leave that behind. I'd also like to leave behind this idea that if you're an older player in the draft, that somehow you're garbage. I remember talking to Norman Powell years ago, his rookie season, when he was really blossoming for the Toronto Raptors, and just the way he described how people evaluated him in the draft and just didn't want to take a chance on him. And he kind of just hung his head, this idea that here you are 22 and somehow already people are saying, I don't know if you're actually going to make it after having spent, 15 some odd years dedicated to this sport, and somehow you're no longer good enough to play it because you spent 4 years at college. And he's had a long NBA career, and I think Jaime will too. So I'm glad to leave, if not that skepticism, just that idea and embrace, as you said, the fact that these players come in all shapes, sizes, and ages, and we should just embrace the fact that they can play at a high level.
Fit matters, man. Like, I remember talking to Draymond Green a few years ago, and he was like, fit is so important. You get like a guy like Marquise Chris, who was the 4th pick in the draft and couldn't break into Phoenix's rotation because they didn't know how to use him. And the Warrior, he's not in the league anymore, so maybe Marquise Chris isn't the best example here, but he had a good couple of years there with Golden State during their lottery years where he was an impactful player. So I don't know. I think fit does matter, and Jaime and the Heat found a good fit on both sides. The other thing I want to leave behind in 2023 is Kyle Lowry frustrations, and I think we're all basically doing that now. He is having such an impressive season for his age, and I will say this, I don't know that the Heat even expected this from Kyle Lowry in this year. I think that the Heat were kind of prepared to be like, yeah, Kyle Lowry, 37 years old, he's probably not going to be very good at the final year of this contract. They made that deal, got him basically for the beginning of that contract to make a run here. But what Lowry has done, stepping back into that starting point guard spot, making threes at a 40+% clip, running the offense, setting the table, all those things. He's another guy where I'm not saying he's untradeable because there's so many, we've covered this enough, but like the salary cap ramifications of moving him as opposed to letting him walk for nothing and all those things. Like, I think he could get traded by February, but I think the threshold of player is much higher now. The Heat have to get a much player back, I think, now than they probably would have needed to get back in if they were to, say, trade him in the preseason, for instance, based on the season that he's had so far. Anything else on that before we keep going?
No, I'm glad to leave that behind because I think Kyle got a bum rap, and I know, again, similar to what we were saying about Duncan, like evaluating him by the cost of his contract, which isn't really your responsibility whatsoever as a fan of this team. Like, you shouldn't have to worry about it. Like, watch what he actually does on the court, and I think he's been really good this season.
I got 2 more here while we have time. I got Jimmy Butler not making the All-Star team. I'm going to leave that in 2023. Sorry, Jimmy, you're going in 2024. # send Jimmy to Indy. I know you don't want to go, buddy, but I want you to go. I want the Heat to have representation there, and I don't know. I would kind of just think it's funny, and then he can film some Michelob Ultra commercials in Indiana and make a joke about it. But Jimmy Butler is one of the great players we've had in our league. For him not to be in these all-star games perennially, and I understand why he didn't last year because he was hurt for most of the first half of the season. He missed like 20 games before the all-star. I get that. But, hey, you got lucky getting injured last year, Jimmy, so that you weren't forced to go to the all-star weekend. But I'm sorry, you're going to have to go now. That was very 2023. We're leaving that behind. You're going to the all-star game in 2024. All-star voting is open, right, David? So people can could vote. So go ahead, vote Jimmy Butler. Force him to Indianapolis against his will. And then the last thing that I want to leave in 2023 is the Heat participating in the play-in tournament. I know the narrative is out there that the Heat don't need the regular season, that it doesn't matter for them, that they could turn it on. No team wants to be in the play-in tournament. including the Miami Heat. Their plan was never to make it to the play-in tournament. They almost lost in the play-in tournament, never even made it to the first round against the Milwaukee Bucks, and never had a chance to go on that run to the finals. You don't want to be in the play-in tournament and in the league where anything can happen. Let's just avoid that. I think we're already having a more successful season here than we saw last year. And so I wouldn't expect the Heat to be in the play-in tournament. But again, you never really know. We still have so much of the season left. But can you just make this easy on everybody? Just get one of the top 4 seeds. Let's get home court in the first round. And let's just keep it simple. Let's just keep it simple. A nice, normal playoff run. Avoid the play-in tournament. Give us those couple of days off between the end of the regular season and the start of the playoffs. We would be very much appreciative. Let's leave the play-in tournament participation in 2023. What do you think?
I think it's great. I want to leave clutch games behind in 2023 too. Just
leave all of them.
Give me 20-point blowouts, baby. Not on losses, but 20-point blowouts. I just want to see a nice cruise to a victory. I won't know what to do with my hands, but it'll make it so much easier having to worry about what to think, whether or not this game's going to be a disaster or a triumph, depending on the last 5 seconds of the game. Give us some easy wins, please.
Hopefully the Heat get a couple of easy wins in these next couple of days. We are recording this a few days before New Year's, so right before the West Coast swing. So we'll see what ends up happening here, David. But we will have you covered. Well, those games have already happened by the time people are listening to this. But for the next games in the future, we'll have you covered for those as well. Thank you for spending your new year with us. Thank you for spending all of 2023 with us. One thing that we're not leaving behind are you guys, the fans of the show, the listeners of the show, the guys, the people that subscribe, like, comment, leave 5-star rating and reviews. We're not leaving that behind in 2023. We're bringing that into 2024. So for now, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube and follow us on your favorite podcast app. Happy New Year, David.
Happy New Year, Wes.